Welcome to the Jeff Knows Inc. Entrepreneurial Show with your host, Jeff Lopes.
We are live on the Jeff Knows Inc. podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Lopes. Super excited to have on today Hamody Jasim. What is up, brother?
How you doing, G'day? Thank you for having me, Jeff.
This is going to be a fun conversation. We met on social media. Incredible story. He's doing amazing things now. He's moved to the U.S., known as a terrorist whisperer. He's got a book, authored a book. He's got a movie, tons of things we're going to talk about today. Let's start off by your story. I mean, growing up, and I'm sure you've told your story as a child, growing up in Iraq, you didn't have a normal childhood. I mean, most kids in the U.S., North America, they want to be a baseball player. They want to be a hockey player. They want to play a sport. Growing up, where was your vision? I mean, is military something that's engraved in the culture there, that's something that every child looks forward to grow into, to participate in? How does that work in Iraq?
I can assure you that no one grows up in Iraq wanting to be a spy. And it's you can never compare the life growing up under a dictatorship like Saddam Hussein or a third world country like Iraq to the United States. There's a big difference between a normal planet and a non-normal planet. And Iraq at the time was absolutely far away from being a normal place. And you're talking about a country that was policed by over 35 intelligence agencies. It was extremely dangerous for you to say any word, to have any disagreement with the government, to be in the wrong side with of the wrong people. It was tough, man. It was not the easiest childhood. And if you defend yourself in that environment or that culture, you could end up in a really, really bad places like where I was. And the only reason I left some of these bad places is because it wasn't, I was just lucky. I can tell you that there's thousands of people that end up going to the same route that I went and never made it out. So when you're talking about Iraq, man, Iraq was completely a chaos. You're talking about a regime that controlled every single thing, including your words. And you had nothing else you would think about other than just surviving the day.
What age were you the first time that you said, like, you revolted or you pushed back or you voiced your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up during the first Gulf War in 1991, seeing the war, seeing all the explosions. But as a kid, you really don't know any difference. My first run with the government was when I was 12 years old.
Young.
And 12-year-old is I actually walked out of my middle school in a peaceful day, and not like any American kid would take the bus. We don't have buses. We're not the elite, so we just go and walk to school. And it was just a normal day. I walk every single day. I really didn't know how the structure of the government back then, how things worked, how people, acted. And I was approached by a police officer who happened to be a Ba'ath Party member, which is Saddam's political party. And when you talk about the Ba'ath Party, it's almost like the Communist Party. Ba'ath Party was extremely designed and inspired by the Communist Party. Fidel Castro was pretty close friend of Saddam Hussein. So when you got approached by someone like that, at a 12-year-old, you really don't know how to properly act around somebody like that. And the one thing that you notice is that a Ba'ath Party member always sounds different, dress different, look different. And I'll never forget, the police officers who approached me looked completely different than the other two guards that were behind him. And he asked me a question. He said, "Do you have any money in your pocket?" And the problem for me is I didn't know the norm back then. If they ask you for money in your pocket, you take whatever you got and you give it to them without questions asked. And that was the norm. And that's how things went. But when I personally just was asked that question, I just decided to walk away. I didn't know really what the answer was. I just whatever. I just walk away. And when I walked away, that police patrol parked right in front of me, cut me off. And he got out. He was about 6 foot tall, officer, looked different, sounds different. and immediately searched me. And when he searched me, he found money that I have in my pocket, and things escalated. I end up getting slapped to the ground. When I got slapped to the ground, I cursed him. I got hurt really bad. I mean, imagine you're a 12-year-old kid, skinny, living through the sanctions during the 90s. You barely get enough food a day. And someone comes in 6 foot tall, who's fed really well, slaps you really hard to the face and drops you down to the ground. I couldn't hold it. I cursed him. And then from there, it was personal because it was a culture thing. I cursed him. I cursed his sister, his mom, whatever it is. And he grabbed me and threw me in the police patrol and started driving. And he drove about 45 minutes. And I remember getting through a gate, which was like the gate of the Iraqi Ministry of Interior. And this is like the Ministry of Police in Iraq. And when I passed that gate, normal citizens would never pass that gate, don't know what's behind it. We usually just drive by it. It was my first time in my life actually going behind the guards and seeing what this presidential or governmental areas look like. And he drove about 2 miles after that checkpoint, and we passed actually the Ministry of Interior. And to the right side, there was actually a compound, and the compound was completely shut down, blocked from the whole world, and a slide door open. And when that slide door opened, and you saw nothing but cages and razor wires, and it just looked different. And that compound was actually like a prison camp for individuals who were anti-government. Of course, you would think, what is a 12-year-old that refused to give what's equal 250 dinars, like, well, a few dollars? What is a kid going to do there? And then I had the same question. What am I doing there? What's the point of me being in there? You know, and my whole time thinking is that I was just going to get slapped and go home. And there was a conversation between the guard and the guy in the front who actually booked me, the bath party member. He said, "Hey man, he's just a kid. Why don't you just slap him right here and let him go?" And that was when he actually left my town. And he turned around. He said, "If you keep talking, I'm going to throw you what I'm throwing him tonight." And the guy next to me just zipped his mouth. And I had a hope when I got to that compound that this was just some kind of a thing to scare me and let me go. And I sat in the car, and then they called me up. There was a dark room in the beginning of that compound. And I walked in, and I was given a pen. He wrote a report on a paper, white piece of paper, and he stated that I was an anti-government fighter that tried to assassinate him while on duty. And I was given a pen, and I was told to sign. And the last scene I remember when I was holding that pen, is there were guards with bats in their hands staring at me. And I took the pen and I signed, and I have no idea what the 100 words that were written in that report were. And I was taken immediately and thrown into prison with not like an American prison with like a single cell. It was actually like a warehouse with 500 people in it.
I'm just in awe. I'm in awe because I have a 14, 16-year-old child that I can't, and they're responsible. They're very independent. And I can't imagine even anything in any regards allowing them to go through something like that. Through this whole process, where were your parents? Like, how did this all, like, were they contacted? Like, how does, and this might be a stupid question for there, but like, how does that work with a 12-year-old? You're a baby. You're literally a baby.
Yeah. So back then there was no cell phones or anything.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I'm aware.
Cell phones were not allowed in Iraq, period.
Yeah.
And, the biggest worry for me is how my family going to find out where I am. And in my head is that this is it. Like, I will be here. I entered the prison. There were people that were there for 25 years or longer.
Oh God.
There were people that entered that place young, and now they're old, and now they're gone crazy. Yeah. And I'll never forget the scene. And I've said this before when I was in different podcasts. The one scene that scared me the most actually, it was an older man who was bald and had a lighter in his hand, and he kept turning that lighter on, and he would put it all around his bald head. And I couldn't understand what that was. And one of the prisoners said this guy went crazy, and because he was being tortured for so many years, he's been being hit to the head. He's not himself anymore. So he does things that are not normal. And within half an hour in that prison, I was taken to a room. I was tortured, and I was forced to give confessions for things that I didn't know. I didn't know who the resisting groups were in the country. I didn't know who the enemy was of the government. Whatever they were telling me, I would say yes. And of course, when you're hanged upside down from your leg and you're being hit by a very nasty hoses with a stick inside of them, you will say whatever they ask you to do. And I was terrified. I passed out within about half an hour. And then I was taken back to the prison. And one of the prisoners asked me, he's like, do you have any money? And I said, I gave him about 250 dinars. I had money in my socks that he didn't find. And I hid about another 250 dinars in my socks the whole time. And I took that money, and the prisoner took it from me. And I didn't know what the prisoner was trying to do. He's like, give me the money. So I just gave him the money. I didn't really care at the time. And at night, when everybody leaves, there was a guard who actually cleans the commanders of the prison office. That guard makes phone calls through a landline for the prisoners to tell their families things about them. And he gave the money to the guard. And I just asked the guard, I said, please tell me the name of the person that answers the phone. I didn't believe that was going to be true, that he was going to do what he said he was going to do. And he came back and he said, your brother answered the phone. And he gave me the name of my brother. And when he gave me the name of my brother, that was my first relief, is that at least whatever happens, my family knew I got picked up by somebody. And he told my family what prison I was in and told them to never mention how they found out and hang up the phone. So my family immediately started putting money together, met with the commander of the prison, started putting money together to actually smash the report. Because if the report gets submitted to the government, you actually face what's called a Ba'ath Party Supreme Judge, and you end up either getting executed or going to underground prison. So as miserable that prison was, that was just a transformation prison. You're
like a holding cell in a way.
There's a holding cell, and you're just going to get transferred to whatever your sentence is. And I had no idea this whole time what was happening in the outside. I spent a few weeks there. That changed my whole entire life. The prisoners, the people, I would never forget the faces of the people that were there. I'll never forget the food. They gave you half chickpeas. They were half warmed. It was not a soup. It was chickpeas warmed up with water, hot water. And that's what you ate. And I remember they gave you half a piece of a bread that you can hit somebody in the head and you'll injure them with that piece of bread. And that's what you ate. And some of the prisoners were forcing you to eat because you have to eat to survive. And one thing they will do in the prison around 4:30 every morning, one of the commanders in the prison will enter the prison and counts every single person every morning. So you could be asleep on the floor, and all of a sudden they enter the prison and they start counting people. And you get up and terrified. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if they're going to call you. Call your name. And if you get called out and you're out of that cell, you're going nowhere else but being tortured. And that was my environment. That was my every day being in that prison. And then when my family paid a great amount of money, I end up being taken out of prison, and the same slide door opened that I came through, and I saw my father was standing right across.
How was the reaction of your parents in that moment? Those are moments that are life changing, right? When those doors open, because I mean, you never thought I'm sure there's a million times that passed through your head. You never thought you were going to ever see them again, right?
Honestly,
you're a 12-year-old. You're a baby. Like I just I look at my son in my head. I'm visualizing my son. I'm like, that hugs me and kisses me every 2 seconds, and when he sees me, like,
yeah,
man,
it was actually a tough moment because you didn't know if you were in trouble. You didn't know what was going to happen, and the most scary part is before seeing your dad. Before I saw my dad, I usually get taken to the left side of the prison where I get tortured. And then when they took me to the right side, I felt this was it. Like this was, if the left side was torture, the right side got to be something worse. And I was terrified. It was the most terrifying 10 meters that I had to walk in my life. And when I walked towards that way, and I'm like, I'm probably being transferred to either get executed, either sent somewhere else. And I have given confessions. I don't even know how big they are. So I just walked out and I was terrified. What was going to happen? I was waiting for one of the guards to pull their gun and shoot me. I was going to get executed military style. I was being considered an enemy of the state at that point. And I was not being looked at as a 12-year-old child. I was being looked at as an enemy of the state. I tried to do something to a Ba'ath Party member while on duty. And I just waited until that slide door opened. When I saw my dad, I just kind of went silent. And the guard behind me opened my handcuffs from my legs and from my arms. And he looked at me and he said, walk and do not turn. And I didn't really see his face. And he opened the handcuffs and he just said, go and do not turn around. And I just walked and I didn't turn around. And when I got out, my dad took me. I didn't say anything to my dad. We were both quiet all the way going home. And, I think my dad was mad at me for actually not giving the money away. And that's where my dad was mad. And my dad was mad that I resisted. Like, you had to be a crazy person and you have to be insane to actually resist in an environment like that.
Did your parents ever have that conversation with you prior to that moment? Parents have a conversation with their kids and saying this happens.
They do. It was a normal thing in Iraq. You run to the wrong person, you got to know the difference. You got to obey.
Yeah. Okay.
And for me, it's just, I didn't. I guess I was a punk. I just didn't want to give my money away. That was how simple it was. And holding that kind of values didn't exist in my culture. So when I got to the house, my whole life changed from there. How do you live your life?
After that,
going out of concentration camp pretty much to going back to normal life like nothing happened. And every single day I kept thinking about the people I left behind in prison, the people that have been there for years. And my whole life changed from there. I went from being an A student to being the shittiest students in school. I didn't care about any of my classes, my grades. I didn't care about any of it. Even English. I was failing English. I was following religion. I didn't care about anything in the school. And I really was falling. And I failed until school kicked me out pretty much. And they sent me to night school.
What age was that at?
I went to night school around like 14 years old. And my day school was not accepting me anymore. I have failed so many times. I've made so many attempts. And my family kind of knew what was going on with me. I went to night school. And I just showed up and I was really just there, just being there. I didn't care about school. I didn't care about future in Iraq. And I would lie to myself that there was any future in Iraq. And you kind of know back then, if you run to the wrong person again, you're done. You're finished. I just walked out and everything was the same in my life. I was quiet. I stayed out of trouble. I walked by the wall every single day and I didn't look left or right. I didn't talk to nobody. Avoided a lot of human beings, avoided a lot of bullies that are the sons of very high-ranking people in the government, and just walk and did my thing, man. That's all I did every single day until about 2003 when I opened my front door and there was an American soldier standing there.
2003, how old were you then? 16? 17?
Yes, sir.
So American soldiers at your door, obviously, through that process, through that 14 to 17,
yeah,
did you start studying or reading up or trying to learn more about opposing the government?
No, not
or
really.
Nothing.
I mean, nothing really. Honestly, when I opened that door, it was the biggest table turn in my whole life. You go from a very controlled environment to bath party members to all this going on. And all of a sudden you open the door, you don't see none of these people. You see American soldiers standing there. You see a white guy standing there. I mean, that was a big change for me. So when I opened that door and I saw that American soldier, I can tell you that was the first time in my life to make that step out of that door without being afraid. And getting out of that door, one hell of a moment. And I'll tell you, like, looking left and right, and you see no signs of any of these people that you're looking at every single day. And my biggest worry back then at the time, if the American troops were going to pull out like they did in 1991 in the first Gulf War, and then they're back and Saddam is back at it again, and then they'll kill you. And I was just, before I even started the conversations, I said, "Are you guys staying this time?" And he said, "Oh yeah, we're staying this time." And when he said that, it gave me assurance that this was a big change. And the table turned from there. And from there, within days, I joined the Iraqi military because they let go of the old Iraqi military. They established a new Iraqi military. And they had an ad on the radio. At the time, the U.S. military PSYOP was setting up all these TV stations and radio stations. And I heard an ad on the radio, and they said, "We're recruiting police officers and military." And at the time in Iraq, nobody in Iraq wanted to be in the military. The military was mandatory during Saddam time.
Yeah.
So nobody wanted to be in the military. And I showed up at the recruiting station with about 4 people in front of me in the line. And probably this was the most hopeless 5 people in Iraq in 2003. And truly, when I got to learn the stories of the people who were ahead of me, they had a lot worse experience than I did. Here, I thought my experience was horrific and scary, and I was nothing compared to others. And made it in. I was 17 years old. They were taking 18 years old and above. I faked an ID. I made myself an 18-year-old, and I went in. I was dying to go in, and we got shipped to northern of Iraq in a base called Karkush. It's near the mountains between the borders of Iraq and Iran. And there was an American company called MPRI that actually took the contract to train the 1st Division of the Iraqi military. And we went there. We got there. And the second shipment was supposed to follow us within a week from the recruiting center, end up getting hit by a car bomb. And a lot of them didn't make it. So you made it. We kind of waited before we started the training for the second shipment. And then we were told the second shipment, most of them were dead. And there's no one coming. And we started our training officially. And this company, MPRI, have really done their job to the extent that when we got out of the bus and they saw what most of us look like, most of us are very skinny. You can see our bones because we were hungry for years. None of us were able to afford to eat meat. Most of us were not fed well. Most of us were extremely small, skinny, and out of shape and had no muscle tone. And that's what in the picture. And if I show you the picture of all the soldiers that was around back then, not one person was overweight, or everybody was just going through hell. And what they did, the American company, the trainers were actually, majority of them were Vietnam veterans. And the American company came in and said, "Hey, we need to contract with the best restaurant in Iraq." And they brought actually a 5-star restaurant. And they contracted with that place to cater food for the training, the training for the basic camp, the basic training for the 3 months. And it was our first time. We walked into the DFAC on the first day, and we actually saw steak. And we smelled the meat before going into the DFAC. And we couldn't believe that was ours. Like, that was actually for us. And they told us before we even went in, and they said, "Look, You're about to get a plate. If you get hungry, go back again. And we just kept going. And I can tell you that you couldn't hear anything but people eating in that day. And we started our training, and we were training about PT twice a day, going to the range every other day. This was actually a proper basic training. There was no military in Iraq. There was actually ICDC, which is Iraqi Civil Defense Corps, mostly locals from the areas they live in.
Yeah.
We were kind of like the first division that was brought from all over Iraq. You had Kurds, Yazidis, Muslims, Sunni Shia, people from all over the planet in one platoon. And they melted you all in one pot, and you started training together. And we spent the 3 months, and the division had about 3 brigades at the time. And after our training, the first Fallujah battle started. So they sent the first division as the first Iraqi military personnel to put their foot in the ground in the first Fallujah battle. And then they pulled a battalion from Al-Anbar province, where we're fighting in Fallujah, and they sent us to Baghdad. And in Baghdad, there was the Iraqi recruiting center where we actually got recruited, where the car bombs used to go off.
Yeah.
And they said, your job is to defend the recruiting center and to face the enemy that's actually attacking the recruiting center. And the area that actually attacked the recruiting center every single day in Baghdad is called Haifa Street. And Haifa Street was about a 2-mile road, starts with an inner circle, and it was actually the most dangerous 2 miles in the world at that point. And that road was called actually the Purple Heart Valley, is because how many American soldiers were actually rewarded the Purple Heart in that area specifically. More soldiers than anybody. And when we got there, we saw the 500-meter wide recruiting center. We got there, and all we remember when we first got there, we see RPG holes on the wall. It was actually rocket propelled grenades holes on the wall. Every single day, you'll have a car bomb or a suicide bomber attack around 7 o'clock, between 7 o'clock and 7:30 in the morning. And the reason why is because that's when the new recruits start lining up in the line to get into the MEP station. So 7 to 7:30 in the morning, that is a bomber attack. There's no doubt. And every night around the evenings, which is around like 7:30, 8 o'clock, you'll be attacked at the gate by personnel from Haifa Street. So you actually got no sleep. You were exhausted. And that's before you even patrolled the most dangerous miles in the world, which is Haifa Street. That's just you defending the barracks where you are, where you're sleeping, where you're holding the ground. And our little base was extremely little. We had American base about 2 miles away behind us. We had about 7 to 8 American soldiers and a Bradley parked right behind us in case our line fell by one of these attacks at night, that there was an American soldiers can prevent an attack towards the American base. So they were kind of forward with us, and these guys sat in the Bradley and just kind of set a line right behind us. So we were kind of like the front. They were behind us. And every single day you get attacked in the morning, a car bomb, suicide bomber, every single day. I cannot count for you how many suicide bombers. And the more bombers blow up every single day is the less recruits start showing up at the recruiting stations.
Yeah.
Because the goal was to scare people from joining the Iraqi military, to prevent Iraqis from fighting side by side the Americans. And I will never forget that they decided to go heavy duty, and they brought a cement truck and they filled it with C4.
Oh, God.
And at that point, I have worked night shift, and I went around 6 o'clock in the morning. I went to sleep for a little bit. I mean, my shift at the time as a platoon sergeant would go for almost around 20 hours, 22 hours. I'll get 2 hours sleep and I'm back at the gate. And the barracks is right behind the gate. So I'm literally where I sleep is only meters from where the gate is.
Yeah.
And I was sleeping on a double bed. and I was sleeping in the top level. And the person under me was actually at the gate, holding his position, like in his duty. And when that car bomb blew up, it was a cement truck, and it has, I don't know how many pounds or tons of C4 that thing has. All we knew is they filled it up with what looked like plastic barrels, and all wired all together. When that thing blew up, it felt like you just had a nuclear attack. I got thrown from the top of the bed to the ground.
Just the vibration. The vibration.
I felt the wall right next to me was gonna fall on me.
It's crazy. And
when it blew up, we've been blowing up before. We have seen car bombs, suicide bombers blow up. You hear it. It shakes the ground a little bit. But that was scary. It shook a whole entire concrete building. And I immediately put my gear and ran out. And at the time, when I got out, I couldn't see. When you got out, it looked like a nuclear bomb just went off. You see a big dark cloud, dust everywhere. You can't really see. And I remember I had a female soldier that was actually right behind the gate. And her job was to search any females coming through to the gate.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing her in the ground without both of her legs. And that was the first scene I saw. She has lost both of her legs. And when I went out, and as soon as I got a vision of what was going on, there was hundreds of people laying on the ground, dead instantly. And you heard a little noise of people that were injured and burnt, and their clothes was not on them anymore. Their clothes was half burnt and gone off their bodies. And I can tell you that the soldiers that were at the gate that day doing that shift, not many of them made it. The ones that went out to respond were the ones that were in the barracks with me. And we went out, we saw things that we could never imagine in our own life. You could help someone who's injured, but when someone is burnt and all the joints are in different places and you just didn't know how to conduct a medical treatment to somebody, we tried to save a few people, but the amount of people that were dead, it was horrific. There was a traffic outside, a lot of cars, a lot of people passing by, families, a lot of line of recruits, my soldiers. And I will never forget that attack. And that day, the scariest thing, after you have carried all the dead bodies, you carried all the injured, the smell that remained in the ground on that road, that will hunt you down to the rest of your life. That day you really smelled the smell of war. And it's not pretty. It's awful. And went back inside and started another day. And
could I ask you a question with this all? Like, something is very evident, and I actually had a guest on, if you know him at all, Chef Rush. Have you heard of Chef Rush?
I think so.
He does 2,200 push-ups every single day. He's a famous celebrity chef, but he did spend a lot of time military and has a lot of accolades as a in the military. And he does 2,200 push-ups every single day for vets that committed suicide. They say 22 vets commit suicide every single day in America.
Yeah,
and it's because of PTSD. Like, how are you with that? And how are you with? I mean, everything you're saying to me is just stuff that no one should go through, and most people will never go through. How was your reaction day after day dealing with that? And we're obviously going to get into. There's a lot more to your story, but how did you cope with that? Because I'm sure you didn't have the counseling, you didn't have no one there. You were dealing with it yourself, and you're still a kid in a way. How did you deal with that?
I mean, it was your environment. You had to accept it, and that's the whole thing. is you had to accept it because this was your environment. This is what the war was like. And that's how the war started getting uglier every single day. And you would think the day before was a better day. No, it's the day after comes in and it's a worse day than the day you had before. And that was Iraq in 2004. The fighting was pretty close contact. It was almost, you were facing that enemy fighting, you were exchanging fire, and that was the style, and that's what the enemy was doing. And for me, I'll be honest with you, I don't know how I was dealing with that. I was just trying to do my job, and I was trying to keep myself together. But
survival mode.
But you, where else would you go?
Yeah.
Do you go back home and where this enemy could actually do even worse to you?
Yeah.
Knowing that you have been in the military or you've been helping the Americans, you just didn't have an option. You were there to fight for your life, and that's all you got. And of course, your enemy was much more powerful than you. They got car bombs, they got suicide bombers, they got RPGs. And at the time, the Iraqi military did not even have anything bigger than a PKC.
Yeah,
that's it. You had small firearms. Your enemy has everything.
Was Saddam still in power at the time, or he was?
No,
already,
Saddam was done.
He was done already. So now you're looking. Are you dealing with more? What are you dealing with? ISIS?
Yeah. No, it was actually Al Qaeda. So
Al Qaeda. Okay.
Saddam fell down. That was the rise of Al Qaeda, the rise of the Ba'ath Party, which is Saddam allies, Saddam loyalists started coming up. I mean, to put it in a way, and in an all honest way, you were fighting the whole country.
It was that bad, huh? Fuck.
It was that bad. You were fighting the whole country. You had terrorist organizations that popped out you never even heard of, but you were fighting them.
So people were trying to take advantage of to take control at that time. Yeah.
I mean, when you're talking about Iraq in 2004, that was the Wild West.
Yeah.
That was the Wild West. That was everybody was fighting you. You just kind of found out as you fought people every single day, and you find out who these groups are, where they want. And at the time, the biggest concentration was to protect the recruiting center, get as many people in, because at that point we had one division. Everybody else was a Iraqi Civil Defense Corps. And this one first Iraqi division has caused damage in the Anbar province, have fought. Is it professional infantry unit? They don't want more of that. So at the time, we were trying to recruit for the second Iraqi division. Yeah. And that was a battle because you're out there fighting to let the process go and take itself in. And you are literally fighting to make sure the recruit is alive by the time he enters the MEP station. And that's what you're trying to do. And fighting to keep these recruits alive. I mean, imagine people gets attacked in the line trying to fill an application. They're going to get discouraged. They're going to walk away and go home.
Of course. Yeah.
And every time a car bomb goes off, people die. Other people stop coming. So the challenge was extremely difficult, extremely scary in a way. And at the time, I had got used to being attacked every single day. I started learning about the enemy every single day, their attacking style. I started realizing that when they attack at night, they're actually not there to attack the base, to take it down the base. They knew they can't take down the base, but they were there to disturb us. We actually, at a certain point, we stopped responding to them. We just took cover because we knew they would not want to break the gate. We locked the gate with chains and a lock, and it was a metal gate. Everything else around them was a T-wall barriers that were like about 10 foot tall, that all they did, they came to attack. So they get us disturbed. So our QRF, which is the guys that are sleeping in the barracks, responds, and we will be awake,
not sleeping
for a few hours, not sleeping. And then boom, 7:30 comes in the morning, they hit you with a car bomb. You learned the style. And the person that was leading them in High Trade was actually a former Republican Guard officer that served under Saddam, was trained in Russia. He specialized in ambush. I mean, this was a professional.
Yeah.
And I could tell you mentally, physically, we were broken, man. You got no sleep. You are exhausted. And you learn their style. And I learned that any attacks at night, they are not the real attacks. The real attacks comes after 7 o'clock in the morning is when people start lining up. And that was the scariest time for me. Every single day being in that base. Imagine when it is 6:59 a.m. in the morning and
you know what's coming.
Minute cuts in, you know, the next 30 minutes of your life, it's going to be wild. And that's how it was.
So crazy.
That's how it was. And you looked left and right. And at the time I would go on above on the tower and I would watch my guys go in, and we have rotated. You know, the soldiers in the front were kind of the first sacrifice, especially the ones that are searching people. The first searchers, usually the ones to die immediately, because you could be searching people and all of a sudden you have a suicide bomber walking right at you wearing a vest. And there's nothing you can do. This is a 2 meter between you and him. So we rotated, and every day we had 2 different guys that were in there, and it's almost like you were playing the lottery.
I was about to say that. That's essentially what it is. You're
and that's how it was. And that's how it was. And you know, and I would never forget the look at each soldier you tell that it's your turn to go up to the front. You would never forget that look. And you walk in there and you stand in there and
not knowing if you're coming back.
And it's so many, absolutely. And it's about 10 meters.
Fuck me, man.
You're about to walk towards you. That this is the most dangerous spot in the whole entire location. And, you know, small firearms attacks at night, it sounds nothing compared to a car bomb or a suicide bomber. When that shit goes off, you're done.
When you were there, what was your interaction? Did you have any interaction with your family?
Actually, no, I didn't have any contact with my family at the time. I didn't even own a cell phone at that point.
So, but they were aware that you had joined?
Oh yeah, they know I joined the military, and I stood my ground about doing that. And I can tell you, regardless of how difficult the time I was in or whatever I was going through, holding the most dangerous front line in the world at that point, honestly, in a way, I have to say it in an honest way that I was extremely happy where I was, because it was the first time in my life that I had an equal fight against an enemy of mine.
I was going to say, you're fighting for something you believe in.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the first time in my life. It's gun to gun. I mean, look, I came from prison where I was being tortured and beat the shit out of.
Yeah.
And at that point, I felt that was actually a promotion for me, because it was the first time the people that tortured me, the people that did these horrible things to me, that it is a gun to gun fight. I mean, look, it took me a while to get to that time, to get to that level. And regardless of how much pressure you're on, that's how long it took you to get there. It took you a while. And you know, it feels great. It feels amazing that you are not bending over to these individuals anymore.
Yeah.
You are going bullet to bullet. You're fighting for your rights. A lot of the soldiers I had were former political prisoners, were former ants. They didn't even care for them. They didn't even consider them a human beings. And we just, you know, we felt we were the law, and we were going to do whatever it takes to force this law and force a new constitution and force it in them and shove it on their face whether they like it or not. And that's how we felt. And after that, in 2004, I received an order from my commander. And at the time, the enemy in High Street has but one goal, is to scare people from joining the Iraqi military.
Yeah.
So they figured whatever they were doing at the recruiting center was not enough to scare people. And the truth is, actually, regardless of how bad it was, people still showed up. You didn't have 100 people like you had 200 people or a few hundred people. You go from 400 people standing in the line to 200 to 300 to 100 to about 50 people to about 20 people standing in the line. But they figured it was not enough. And what needs to be done is actually capture an Iraqi soldier in uniform. They figured if one of us behind that line get captured and gets beheaded on national Iraqi TV, that would scare people, to show them this what you will happen to you if you end up joining these guys. And My commander called me to his office, my battalion commander, and me and a 24-year-old lieutenant at the time, who was my platoon leader. And he said to us, there's about 25 dead bodies of new Iraqi recruits that are dumped in the end of Haifa Street. So you're talking about it's an inner circle, goes down 2 miles. And they have kidnapped these recruits by making a deal with one of the public transportation buses. So the bus driver intentionally drove through Haifa Street, which is a red zone. Nobody was supposed to go through that road. And because some of these recruits were not really from Baghdad or from outside of Baghdad, they had no idea where they were. He drove them inside of Haifa Street and handed them over to the enemy and told them these were recruits that I picked up from the front gate. And they took about 25 of them and they executed them. And they laid the bodies near the Tigers River, right in the end of Haifa Street, which is a bridge that goes over the Tigers River. And they placed the bodies right under the bridge. So what we were told, go down through Haifa Street, drive it once, go in, pick up the bodies, and then cross the bridge. Don't come back to Haifa Street, through Haifa Street again. And pick up the bodies, put them on a pickup trucks, and take them to the morgue where their families can go pick them up. Nobody would dare go inside to go pick up those dead bodies. So they figured they'll send a platoon and that will go inside. That will look like a patrol. They're just going in. The little they knew, this was actually an ambush that was set up. And when we went in that day, that Haifa Street was extremely quiet. You couldn't hear anything. And it almost felt like there was a curfew, but there was no curfew going on at the time. But it felt like a curfew. And we drove through. And what they did is they have studied the reaction of our units. They knew that there was a QRF would respond if you get in a firefight. So they have figured out a way to block the QRF, the quick reaction force, by placing IDs and individuals, groups of individuals that will fight any QRF and prevent it from entering Haifa Street. So once you make it in, there would be nobody they'll be able to come in and get you.
No backup.
So we went in, and once we got out of our trucks, we went down. The bodies were actually placed downhill, facing a high buildings. So once we actually went down, we kind of knew this is weird. Why are the bodies all piled up in there? Why they moved all these bodies in there? You couldn't understand. You were trying to figure out what's going on here, what was trying to happen, what was about to happen. And you're looking around, you don't see anything. And that's when actually the first RPG flew into one of our pickup trucks. And there was about 150 fighters behind the walls. Oh. And there was about 29 of us. And me and my platoon leader got separated into 2 different groups. I was under one of the bridge columns. He was under another bridge column, and we separated. And I think I lost about 40% of my soldiers at the time. And because there was a sniper that had about maybe 1 foot haul. I have it actually in pictures. And it was about 1 foot haul that he was using. You couldn't see where he was, but he had the high ground and you were the low ground, and he can see you easily. And he was getting my soldiers one at a time. Actually, the soldiers that were outside of the column were trying to move or get out or trying to push towards the ambush, didn't make it. So we end up all retrieving behind the columns, and our QRF got sent out from the base immediately, as soon as the firefight started. Within about 15 minutes, I started hearing screamings on the radio, but the screamings were not from the platoon that I was in. The screaming was coming from actually the platoon that was coming to get me out. And the call came in, and it was a young Iraqi captain. I'll never forget his face. He said in the radio, I have over 17 of my guys have been shot, and I have about 3 bullets in my back. And that's what he said. And he said, I can't make it. I'm going back. And he couldn't make it. He actually made it almost about few hundred meters into Hyper Street, and he was shredded. He was being shot from both sides, from the left and right.
So this is all planned. Oh my God.
And he couldn't make it. The poor guy had about 3 bullets in his back. And he just said, I have been shot 3 times to the back and I can't make it. So he evacuated himself and all his KRF platoon to the hospital. We knew at that point that there would be nobody there to come get us. So the firefight went on for about an hour and 45 minutes. And every minute they were getting closer distance. I lost contact with my platoon commander. And there was a young American lieutenant of the 1st Cav. Name is Lieutenant Jeff Morris, who also wrote a book called Legion Rising. And actually, he wrote about the ambush from the outside of his side of the story coming into the ambush.
You said his name is what?
Jeff Morris.
Jeff Morris.
Lieutenant Jeff Morris. Legion Rising is the name of the book. And Jeff actually was, Haifa Street was his area of responsibility. He was the guy that was fighting in the Purple Heart Valley every single day.
Yeah. And
kind of knew the enemy much more better than we did in that side of the town. And him and his platoon sergeant, Sergeant First Class Salazar at the time, he passed away from COVID about a year ago, made a decision that how they were going to break into this ambush. And these guys were pretty much like the cowboys of the armored Bradley vehicles. These guys were the best you can get in the 1st Cav. And they entered Haifa Street in the most classic style. They made the enemy think that they were going to come from one side, but they actually went from another side. And I believe that Jeff Morris actually have broken the rules of engagement that day and separated into 2 different teams and kind of entered the ambush from the back, actually from behind me. And when he made it through, it took him time, but he was going through traffic. He was going through every single thing. But this guy was a young lieutenant, had the best guys, best platoon. This was the best time in his life. And he made it through. And as soon as he made it through, the firefight actually stopped because he opened fire with his 25 cannon on the Bradley and came in and he pushed really hard. And when he got out, when the Bradley door opened from the back, this was actually the most horrific moment in Jeff Morris' life. When he got out, he saw a dead body with no head in uniform was tied up to the traffic light. And I didn't see that until I actually got evacuated out. When I got evacuated out, there was only about 9 soldiers of mine left. When I got up the hill, I was already shot to the left knee with a grenade shrapnel. I was shot to the left eye with a grenade shrapnel. And I was only able to see through my left eye. I was hurt in the eyebrows on the right side. And when I got up, I realized the body was actually of my lieutenant, my platoon leader. He was actually captured alive and beheaded. And this whole time we are exchanging fire, we hear screamings of them celebrating of some sort. And we thought they were celebrating because they had us pinned down. And it was actually, they were celebrating the killing of our second group and our platoon leader. And this was the scary moment in Jeff Morris' life. As he mentioned, it was the most scary moment in my life because I didn't know what his head was. And I recognized him from the rank. There was blood all over his body armor and his uniform. And it's a horrific scene that you saw. And we got evacuated. We all went to the hospital. They took us to the military combat hospital in the Green Zone. And it's hard, man, when you leave the base with 29 faces, 29 souls, and you come back with 8, and you're number 9. And the base was different from that day. As soon as we made it back to the base, none of us was in a normal condition. About 50% of the unit has resigned from its job at that point. People started running away. People started taking their uniform. They realized this was a lot bigger than just getting paid every month. This was scary, and they needed to leave. And they packed their stuff and they left through the gate. So when I actually made it back to the gate, there was people in civilian clothes walking out. These were soldiers of ours. And I went back, and I remember sitting in the bed on the barracks, as there was a couple NCOs, couple soldiers out there with me. And we're just sitting in there thinking, like, what is your next step? What do you do from here? Where do you go? And I got called to the Iraqi Ministry of Defense the day after, and I received a battlefield promotion. So I actually got promoted from a staff sergeant to a command sergeant major in the Iraqi military. And for someone my age at the time, I was gone 18 years old. This was a rank of someone who's about 25 years older than me. And I got promoted right in there. Went back to my unit, and I was supposed somehow to motivate people about fighting and staying in the military and pushing back and moving forward. And we went into handing the bodies of the soldiers we lost to their families and the process. And we immediately started putting a plan how to actually strike Haifa Street from every angle and search every single building. And that was the goal. And within a couple months, I got requested by an American Special Forces officer to be the command sergeant major of the MOD of the Iraqi Ministry of Defense, which was just getting established. And that's when I got transferred to the Iraqi Ministry of Defense.
And that is where, I guess, a lot of the spy activity occurred after that? Yeah.
So when I got there, actually, there was about the reason that this Special Force officer had requested me to be there, I was one of the only English-speaking NCOs in the Iraqi military. They needed someone to watch over 60 to 70 American advisors within the building. The MOD sat outside of the green zone. And it was not a green zone area. It was actually a red zone area, which means it was controlled only by Iraqis. No American soldiers protection presence. It has its own gate separate from the American green zone. And every single day, 70 American advisors will come in to build the infrastructure of the Iraqi military. And my job was to protect the building. There was about a few hundred Iraqi employees, which eventually got to almost like 3,000 Iraqi employees in that building every single day. And my job was only to protect the building, make sure the advisors leave back to the green zone through their metal gate every single day. And that's what the job that I did every single day. And within a couple months, the Iraqi government started getting divided by religious backgrounds. And we ended up getting a minister of defense from the Anbar province, which is from Fallujah. And he showed up with about 200 men, all military age. And at the time, the Anbar province was completely anti-American. 99% of people in that province were fighting against the Americans. And 200 men showed up, which easily you can tell they were members of Al-Qaeda. And at the time, my job was to really just protect these Americans at all costs and evacuate them if anything happened. And we had one of their individuals that was leading these 200 men from the Anbar province had a suspicious activities around the building. And what it looked like was actually a member of Al-Qaeda who was trying to kidnap an American officer from the building. Because these individuals were fighting in the Anbar province against the Marine Corps. And they came to this building and got access to a place where there's about 70 Americans only walking around with a 9mm in their leg, and they're all between the rank of a major to a colonel. They don't get to see someone of that level walking by himself, going in every single day. So if they had an opportunity in Iraq to kidnap somebody, this was the time and this was the place. And at the time, my job was only to protect these advisors. And from there, I was introduced by an American intelligence officer who I actually worked for. And my job was to just report anything happens to him And from there, things got a lot thicker and a lot bigger. And then I ended up being handed to an intelligence collection team. And I started working as a intelligence asset for the U.S. intelligence. So in the day job is the command sergeant major of the Iraqi Ministry of Defense. My other job was nobody knew about is I was working as an intelligence asset to the U.S. intelligence, building a database onto who is who in that building. This individual who was a member of Al-Qaeda, who was leading the 200-man, long story short, if you watch the documentary, you'll see all that story in there. I end up figuring out who he was, stealing his fingerprint, and he came back to be a member of Al-Fidai and Saddam's suicide fighters. And we prevented him from kidnapping an American officer, which it was like a minute that we had to prevent this person. And before he repeated his attempt, he went home to the Anbar province, and an intelligence collection team dropped a team on him and was able to arrest him with about 25 fighters from a foreign country in Anbar in Garma Fallujah. And when you watch the documentary, you'll see all that details of how that went down. And this was one of the biggest Al-Qaeda members in the Anbar province. And from there, my job as an intelligence asset for the U.S. intelligence kind of took off. I started getting handed from one team to another based on the Patriot Act and 9/11. Everybody was seeing what you're doing. And I started being handed from one person to another. And my job turned to be building a database of all terrorist or bad apples within the Iraqi government or the Iraqi military, and where I worked every single day. And my story there just turns into a different challenge every single day. Good Iraqi officers will leave the building. They will never come back. They will get assassinated within minutes. And I collected on the enemy for about 3 years. Collected intelligence every single day. Made lists and lists of bad apples, of bad individuals. And it was pretty much introducing the American intelligence to the ocean under the iceberg. That was my job. Yeah. And until about I stopped one of members of the Islamic State who was actually building a suicide build within the building. And you're talking about a building that was extremely important, extremely sensitive. You get people like Donald Rumsfeld that come through the building. You get members of Congress that come to visit the building. And as someone who's in charge of the security of the building, as someone who working as an American intelligence asset, my job was to actually block all doors every time there's an American visitor in the building. Block all doors, block everything from the world that was going on inside of this building. I mean, you had terrorist organizations from everywhere, man. You got the Iranian intelligence, you got members of Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, Battle Corps, Naqshbandi, some of these terrorist organizations you never even heard about. And every group had members in that building. And imagine you get a Congress member to visit. What I used to do, I used to lock doors and put soldiers in behind each side of the door. And I will coordinate with the Secret Service about making sure their visit to the Minister of Defense, their official visit, gets done in about a certain time, get out, help them get their canines ahead of time. And at the time, I have stopped a person that was building a suicide build. We were actually tagging him and following him through the whole time. And we end up finding a suicide build in his locker. So we were able to actually take it before he was able to get hold of it. And that was my job. And the U.S. intelligence ordered me to actually open the locker and steal it. And I stole it. And I took it away from him. And from there, my identity was exposed in 2007, 2008. And I operated for 6 months in front of an enemy that knew that I was a U.S. spy. And that
for how long?
For about 6 months.
How dangerous was that?
It was actually the biggest mistake I've made in my life. It had cost me a lot. And I don't leave the building. So this enemy does not know how to get hold of me. They don't know who my family is. They don't know where I live, where I come from. They only see it's the command sergeant major of the person that's protecting the building. And they know you're a U.S. spy. You don't leave to go to the wire, because the people that leave to go outside of that wire to go home, they don't come back. And if you don't belong in any of these organizations, you're done. And Every single day you'll come to the MOD and you'll see black signs, means people have died, didn't come back. And I just sat right in there, and I had one of my teammates, actually, he was an intelligent asset of mine, said, hey, I got to go home. I have not been home in like 6 months. I need to go home. And at the time, he left, and it took exactly 14 minutes. He was assassinated. He was shot with 2 bullets in the head. And
that's crazy. Just to
that
be able
was
to exit there.
Yeah, that was a message for me, even though he took a different exit to leave. But that just told you how much eyes there were there on me. And when I lost the teammates, I kind of knew that this was the end for me, that I had to exit that building. And the best way possible for me to not cost anybody their life, because it wasn't about my life anymore. It was about others who were connected to me. They were going to get hurt. And if they have find out who my family was, they would tear them apart. So the U.S. intelligence at the time ordered me to leave the building and evacuate. And I told my soldiers I was going to see them in 5 minutes. And I left that building and never looked behind. And I disappeared in the middle of the night, walked out, and built a whole database of bad individuals within 3 years. Took down a member of Qaeda in the Anbar province, stopped the members of the Islamic State from blowing up a suicide bomber against any American delegation in the building. I pissed them off a lot, man. So
now from there to your move to the U.S., what's the timeline?
That's when I left the country, actually.
You left the country. Okay. And that was with assistance of the American government?
Yeah. I left in 2008, and I was granted a green card, and I left the building and I went to a U.S. base. I hid there for a few months till my paperwork was all done. And I left and arrived in the United States here in 2008.
Have you, I'm sure other people have asked this of you in other podcasts. Have you had death threats, or since your movies come out and your book and stuff?
Of course. This is a norm thing. This is normal.
Yeah.
They send you messages on Facebook, on Instagram, and of course, when I kind of went low profile until about 2015, and then 2016 my book gets released. 2019 my movie get released. I kind of went back to the light, and they kind of knew you're alive because they thought you were dead this whole time. And I went back. As we're talking today, before I even got on the show with you, I was getting messages from somebody. And
how do you vet through these messages to know which are real, which are not, which are like?
I'll be honest with you, Jeff. I'm so immune to these individuals.
Yeah.
Like, I know they can't do shit. They're overseas. And when they tell me like, hey, we're going to tear you apart, we're going to kill you, we're going to do this, I just tell them like, I'm waiting for it by the mailbox. I guess you'll show up. And they're just talking shit. That's the truth. Like if I didn't know them well, I'd probably be terrified.
Yeah, it's just my head. You'd think there are extremists in the U.S. In the
U.S., there are sleeping cells, and I can assure you, every sleeping cell in the United States is not here to attack anymore. Every sleeping cell in the United States is here to collect
information.
Yeah, they changed their style. Look, I fought these guys for 5 years, man. I collected on them for 3 years.
Yeah.
I got to know what's behind the curtain. I got to know exactly who they were. Yeah. You got to go behind the monster and see who that monster is. And you get immune to them. And that's how my life was, is I was not as scared of them once I got to know who they really are. And some of these most scary terrorists that would shake any American, truly.
Yeah.
I kind of, when I went behind the curtain, I got to laugh at them, man. I said, what a phony individuals they were. They were phony. And I kind of got to see the real character, and you just become immune to them. You get to know about their personal life. You get to know who they really are. And you just wonder, you kind of feel like if these people have applied these skills in a business or in a good thing or to their own country, they would have done so much better for their people, for themselves, for their families. But they apply their skills into evil things. and they end up getting nowhere. And to be honest, like their threats don't bother me anymore. I just kind of pass through the messages, and I get threats from the Iranian influence guys, the guys that are like Iranian influencers within Iraq. I get threats from people in Iran, threats within people who are loyal to Iran and Iraq, and they run the Iraqi government. Are you talking about every single bad guy I collecting on is now the government? It's now the power. And
yeah,
they don't bother me anymore. I'll tell you, I think that the best thing for me right now to slap them with is tell them how great life I'm living in the United States. And that's what pissed them off the most.
What's your day-to-day operation? Like, what's a normal day for you now? Are you working? Are you working on other projects right now? Are you married?
Honestly, I'll tell you this. And I just keep my family off anything.
Okay. Awesome. Okay.
And I'll be honest with you. Like, my life is completely boring today compared to what it used to.
Of course.
And Hamody and 5 years of war. I mean, of course, my life now is really just focusing on my health, focusing on all the damages I took from 5 years of war.
Yeah.
Focusing on fixing my TBIs, my traumatic brain injuries that I have been blowing up so many times, and focusing on just living my life. I actually worked for the military as an instructor, being a SIAB instructor for the U.S. military and a trainer for so many years. And I decided to leave it and decided to walk away from anything that would remind me of my environment.
Yeah.
Just started a new life. I started a business. Do
you want me asking what your business is about?
Yeah. I started doing like real estate media. I am a videographer. So
very cool.
Yeah, I went to school for like videography and started doing media company, and I started a podcast actually called The Black Site Show, which I'm actually sitting right now on my studio.
Very good. How many episodes are you in on that?
I think I have about 4 so far, and we actually cover. It's called The Black Site Show, and we cover Middle East counterterrorism. Intelligence operations, espionage, and stuff like that. Very cool. Something within our own background.
Yeah.
We've been doing some Ukraine war, Iran, something we specialize on. We don't just kind of put any podcast out there, but we do that, and I do that. I started that, and I started it not for the fact that I want to make money out of it or anything. I started for the fact because it's a way of me to fight this enemy in a different way.
Yeah.
And now the war is actually information. So
yeah, I agree with that. Information and media controls a lot right now. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I literally, this is what I do. And that's what I, every single day, that's my day. Between my business and this and the podcast and
Sometimes a simple life is the best life.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Sometimes
I agree with you, man. I've been an entrepreneur for 26 years. I do a bunch of different ventures, and sometimes when you just sit down and look at your feet and be present and just being able to live in the moment is so special.
It is, and you really get that peace. I mean, I'll tell you, man. After I walked away from my environment, from all this military life and training and preparing for an enemy. And because when I was working with the military, even though I was in a U.S. base training people to go overseas, but I was in that environment still. I was preparing somebody for that environment.
Yeah, it triggers memories all the time, 24/7,
all the time, man. Yeah. I think I started getting that personality back from being back in the MOD. And when you come home, and you got child, you got family. Yeah. You come home, you're still in that personality. You're still
it's hard. Yeah.
And I'm like,
it's hard to separate because it becomes your identity, whether you're a pro athlete or it doesn't matter. It's hard to get that separation of your identity.
And it's tough, right? Because I think outside of that environment that I was in, I was just a normal person. I was just an average person. Nothing special, nothing, anything. I was just an average person. But the environment is what makes you the way you are. Environment what makes you lethal, what makes you
environment and community.
And community in the survival modes, man. The survival modes turns anybody into a monster. And you notice even when you corner a cat in a corner,
100%.
Cat is gonna get aggressive.
Yeah.
That's what the environment is. I was a normal kid. I was an average nerd, but that was my environment. 5 years of facing the most vicious enemy. is going to turn you to somebody. And I'll tell you, through my experience, through every single day I saw in war for 5 years, that the most powerhouse, most heroic powerhouse, strongest people I ever met in battle happen to be people that don't look impressive.
Yeah. It's so crazy. You could take that towards anything in life, man. The greatest business minds, some of the richest people in the world wear a pair of jeans and just a one color shirt, and you'll never know they have money, or they never know how successful they are, because it's hard to tell. Sometimes it's easy to fake it, but it's hard to truly be it. And it really is. And I feel like, now I live a very boring life, and I enjoy it. And I just get up and do my little things. I wouldn't say it's boring. I say it's new ventures. It's new life. Life is just metals. I always say that, and it's just a different metal of your life that you're going through. And and sometimes it's you need this. You need these separations, right?
Definitely, you do. But you will never be able to detach yourself from what.
Of course not.
You'll never be able to detach yourself from that environment. And I actually recently ended up going to brain treatment so I can detach myself from my environment. And interesting part for me is when I went to this high level treatment.
Yeah.
And they go through your brain and they get to see like what you've been through. And they were doing like research. I was like the guinea pig. They were trying to do a research to see
the trauma,
what's like to have a POW, what's like to have a soldier who's been at war for 5 years continuously. And one interesting thing they found is my cortisol level were 767.
Explain that to me. Is that high, low? Like, I don't know.
So 767 was my cortisol level, and normal is at 70.
Wow.
So mine was about 700 times higher than normal. And
so what does that react to? Is that you're you're stopping you from sleeping and stuff? I'm going like
absolutely. The only reason I went to treatment because I was not sleeping at all.
Yeah, I wasn't about to say that. That's the first thing that will probably react to. That's crazy.
And the one thing they found, they found out every single day in my life, and every night, every time I went to bed, I actually acted the same exact way when I was in the MOD, when I was among the enemy. That I locked doors, I was extremely alerted, I can't sleep that well. And they found out that my brain, because I was in this war and this environment for 5 years continuously, and I was too young. I was not a 26 years old. My brain was not complete. I was going to say,
your front photos haven't been developed yet. You're looking at 24, 23, 24 before you're looking at full development.
Exactly. So my brain had that setting. It set itself to that environment, to that war environment. But when I left the war in 2008 and came to the United States, my brain did not know how to go back to normal. And to this day that I'm 37 years old, man, I lived from age 22, 23 years old to about 37 on a brain setting that I didn't need. I didn't need. And because what happens, your brain was actually setting itself to that environment. So I came home and I was technically, physically, I was in the United States, but mentally I was not. I was still in the same environment.
The separation, identity, that's crazy.
And my doctor has said it, and she said, your body has left the battle, your brain didn't. And that's why how many vets, the suicide rate, the drama, the stress, fucked up. If you think about it, PTSD, TBIs, all of that, it's all hormonals. Hormonals. And when your hormones are imbalanced, you really are not in control anymore. And that's why I was getting emotions. I was dreaming in all these bad situations I was in. I was dreaming all about the car bombs, the people dying. It's because my cortisol level were pretty extremely high. I was still in that fight. And as soon, so they actually treat this with ketamine. And ketamine is basically anesthesia they give you before you go to surgery. And even when they told me, I was like, what the hell am I doing?
So it's like almost numbing you out?
So what they do is they give you ketamine through the nose. And what it does, the ketamine actually makes your brain file a new claim. It gives it a reset.
That's crazy. I never heard of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And they actually, I didn't even know what the hell they were giving me. They're like, "Hey, we're going to give you ketamine." I was like, "What the hell is that? What does that do?" And when they give it to you, you get extremely high. I mean, look, if you have done any drugs in your life, they're nothing compared when they give you ketamine straight to the brain. And this is for people who are, before they go to surgery. And that's why when you wake up from surgeries, you don't remember.
Yeah, you're cloudy, you're dazed. Yeah.
Shoot you with that. And as soon as they shoot you with that, you actually, your brain file a new claim and you start a new file and you get resetted. And perhaps actually when I got up from my first ketamine session, I did about 2. They put you in a clinic and they shot the ketamine up my nose and I got really, really high. I mean, you're talking about, I said really bad things and I made crazy statements. And when the ketamine session was over and I got up from that bed, I can assure you the person that laid on that bed and the person that got up away from that bed was 2 different people. And when I got up, I have felt my PTSD was gone. I have felt my body was not as tight anymore. Usually my traps are tight. My body's very tight.
Tension, stress.
When I got up, I felt very light. I felt like Hamody in high school. And that's exactly how I felt. And I just like, wow, like I feel so light. I feel so free. I was smiling out of nowhere. Of course, you're still a little bit high, but you're wondering like, what just changed? I mean, you're 12 years you're living with this. It's called the after effects.
Yeah.
You're living with this for 12 years. It's hard. It's like you're having a baby, man. It's like you're having a child with you. And all of a sudden that feeling is gone. And it's an amazing feeling, honestly. And perhaps when I went down after that session, they had a hard time moving my lower neck. Like I was really tight. They couldn't move my neck. And they have it actually in video. They immediately was able to move my neck. My body was all let go. And it was an amazing feeling. It was probably one of the best. It's actually one of the best TBI treatment centers in the country. It's ran by an organization called Defenders of Freedom, who is an organization that actually started greeting soldiers in 2004 in Texas at the airport, to becoming a clinic, to becoming treating all these vets who came back from war with TBIs. And I was fortunate to be one of the first people to go through the treatment. And wonderful staff, wonderful doctors, people that really love and cared about the troops. And actually, they had a couple of Canadian soldiers that went through the treatment as well, combat veterans of the Canadian military. Just beautiful people, man. People that really
they care.
And I didn't really think this was going to be anything good for me. And they changed my life. And I'm thankful to these people. I actually just spoke for them, did my second event for them about a couple weeks ago in Texas and Dallas. And yeah, it's been great, man. And then I can tell you, now I'm just in peace with my life, and that's where I am. Have
you ever looked at, and so the last thing we're talking about is, because I had a guest on, military vet, a gentleman I've become friends with. He has a good social media presence, Nick Kumiladis. And
Nick the Marine,
yeah, and he
very smart guy. Has a huge entrepreneur.
Just a good dude. Good dude.
Yeah, he is. And I actually follow him. He's one of my favorites. Yeah.
You'd be a great guest for his podcast. So I'll do intro to you guys. I have a good relationship with Nick, and he was he said TRT, which is testosterone therapy, changed his life because his test levels, because of all the trauma, had dropped so low and he never knew it. And he was depressed, and that made a huge. And he's a very, I mean, I on my podcast, and he was heavily promoting it and all that. Is that something you ever looked into and checked your test levels?
Oh yeah, I have. I mean, that's part of the treatment that I went to. They actually.
It is part of that. Yeah.
Yeah, they take all your blood and they see all the panels. I mean, they did a massive blood testing. God, I mean, they went through every single thing. I mean, they found out things I didn't even know about myself. They found out like my body stopped making hormone growth. If I get injured, I can recover. It just shows you what a brain injury does. And
it's crazy. I don't think people realize that. I think that the awareness has to be out there, because I don't think people, and this could be, I mean, this is sports, playing college football. This could happen to you. Like, people don't realize it. And the damage that could happen through all the trauma and everything you've been through. Like these vets coming back, if they don't have somebody to help them or guide them, and they just start living their normal life and going back to their family, it's years and years of suffering, and they might not want to admit it. And it's years and years of suffering they're going through. And there's clinics like that are willing to help, right?
It is. There's, unfortunately, in the United States, there's not many programs out there that will do this. This is a private program. This is a program.
Is it privately funded, or do you have to, the people have to pay to use it?
Funded.
So, but do people have to pay, or is it?
No, you don't. Actually, donors pay for it.
Donors. Okay.
Good people that love the troops do it. And and it really, it just, I mean, I'll tell you, man, it's like the VA or the system in the United States here would never do that. This is expensive. This costs about $20,000 to do. I mean, I was there for 14 days every single day for 6 hours.
Wow.
I was at a hotel, and I was given all kind of different shots and medicine for inflammation. I mean, this is a complete repair transformation for a combat
your body. Yeah.
And it's difficult. You go through some pain.
I'm gonna promote it too. What's it called again?
It's called Defenders of Freedom. And Defenders of Freedom, it's a big organization. It's growing right now. Their focus is actually to take some of these unfunctional veterans and transfer them back to life. And it's a hard mission, man. I tell you,
it's a very hard mission, but it's such an important mission, though.
Yeah, I mean, you would go to that clinic very fucked up and thinking like, oh my God, I am so fucked up, until you see the guy next to you and you'd be like, oh shit, I'm not as fucked up as this.
Yeah.
And it really is. I mean, I went with a friend of mine who had worse traumas than I did. Had emotional traumas.
And how are they doing?
I mean, everybody does well, man. I can tell you, everybody comes out of that treatment and does well, end up doing so well. They end up getting back to life, get married, meet somebody, get back to getting a job. These people are magic makers, and I love them. I support them. I go there, talk to the vets. I encourage them to do the treatment, and and that's where my life is, man. And that's what I do now. And I recently got out of the treatment about a couple months ago, and I've been just focusing on my health. And as I said in the beginning of the podcast, that
I always say this, and this is something I besides being an entrepreneur, I coach a lot of entrepreneurs. I help a lot of entrepreneurs, and you have to fill, like Oprah says, you got to fill your cup up first. You've got to take care of yourself first before you're able to take care of your family, take care of your children, take care of your business. You need to take care of your health, and you got to be mentally, physically, and spiritually. And spiritually doesn't have to be religion. It could just be a mindset, but at such a high peak to be able to really do everything properly every day. If not, you're always chasing it. You're always struggling with it. You're always fighting it. Right. So I'm so happy that you've really taken care of yourself. So that's been amazing. Anything you want to leave with our audience today?
Honestly, no. I mean, thank you very much. I love the Canadian people. I have received a great amount of support from people in Canada for all the book orders that I have filled to be sent to Canada. And
I love it. I'm going to make sure I promote all that and get one.
Perhaps I actually created a book button only for Canadians in my profile. So if you go to
awesome
on Instagram, you'll see there's a button only for Canada, because I always send books to Canada, and I have a great amount of people from Canada that follows me. I appreciate everything and all their support they do for us.
Very, very good, man. This has been a great conversation. Going into a conversation, I try to be curious. I try to think, but it's just, you're obviously your story, your life, what you've been through, but just humility. I mean, you just tell by your voice, you're a good guy, and you've done a lot of incredible things. And I'm sure there's so many more chapters of things you're going to be doing with your life. So I appreciate it. I want to keep in contact with you, and anything you ever need. If you ever come to Canada, I would love to hook up with you and meet up. And I appreciate you coming on, buddy.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, brother.